Well, hello, everyone. This is Reverend Dr. Barbara Williams Skinner. I am president of Skinner Leadership Institute and co-convener of the National African American Clergy Network. And we are all waiting anxiously. 36 days from now will be one of the most impactful elections of our lifetimes without any threat of exaggeration. The National African American Clergy Network is joining in this TurnOut Sunday Lawyers and Scholars campaign with Sojourners and our other partner, the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights. We are very, very committed to having at least 4 cities in Arizona and 15 polling sites in each city focused on vulnerable voters, not just among those we normally work with, but also we will include the Navajo Nation as one of these 4 cities. We will work with the Arizona team of Dr. Warren Stewart and Bishop Staccato Powell and Dr. Staccato Powell, as well as the Arizona team on the ground to identify those polling sites. But we cannot even consider an election this monumental and entering it with all of the potential for things going awry without prayer. Part of the reason why we're not anxious is because we are prepared. And not only are we prepared, we also know that the God of all creation is more than prepared for any challenges we face. So I'm excited to be able to ask Reverend Adam Taylor of Sojourners, the acting president, to give us an opening word and prayer. Reverend Taylor.
Thank you, Dr. Skinner. It is so good to see you all and so grateful for the partnership with the Skinner Institute and the National African American Clergy Network. Also really grateful for all of the work you're going to hear about in a second with the Lawyers Committee and the strong partnership there as well. I am so grateful that all of you have joined us. Thank you, Dr. Stewart and Bishop Powell, for your leadership. As Dr. Skinner rightly pointed out, it is not hyperbole to say that our democracy is at stake in this election. But we've also been saying really clearly that our faith, the witness of our faith, is at stake. Some of you may have seen an article that has been kind of gone viral that was in the Atlantic by Barton Gellman. The title is "The Election That Could Break America." And I'm just going to read one line that I think is quite relevant from that article. The coronavirus pandemic, a reckless incumbent, a deluge of mail-in ballots, a vandalized postal service, a resurgent effort to suppress votes, and a trainload of lawsuits are bearing down on the nation's creaky electoral machinery. Sadly, that statement is all too true. And we know that voter suppression efforts, which literally represent an assault on our faith, an assault on Imago Dei, the belief and conviction that everyone is made in the very image and likeness of God, is a part of this election. And it is something that we are actively working together to ensure that we can push back against all of these insidious voter suppression tactics and ensure a free, fair, and safe election in November. Many of you know, and I'm going to be short before I open in prayer, but I'm a proud son, if you will, of Arizona. I finished high school at Amphitheater High School in Tucson, and my parents still live and retired in Tucson. So I am grateful and excited that Arizona now has become a battleground state. And your work on the ground in Arizona is so crucial. I really see voter suppression as what I like to refer to as a modern day Goliath. And Dr. Skinner and Jim and others know that my favorite story from the Bible is the story of David and Goliath, which I'm not going to retell right now. But there is this moment in the story where David uses his sanctified imagination to reconfigure the battlefield in order to conquer Goliath with a slingshot and 5 smooth stones. And I believe that God has given us as the faith community, as church leaders, 5 smooth stones that we absolutely can and have to use in order to slay the Goliath of voter suppression. The first starts with knowledge. You are learning about and already becoming quite familiar with all of the ins and outs of this election. And we're grateful for the lawyers that are on this call. They're going to help us further understand the ins and outs of that we have to share with our congregations and our communities. The second is sound strategy. Just as where there lack vision, the people perish. Where there lacks strategy, campaigns fail. And so you're going to hear about our strategy from Dr. Skinner and others. The third is inspiration. We have to preach and teach about what's at stake in this election in a way that helps particularly young people go from the streets to also go to the polling booth. We have to make it clear that when we don't vote, we dishonor those who came before us, and we jeopardize our very future, because life and death issues are literally on the ballot. 4, we have to offer our public witness. We're doing that through these We Are Watching meetings with senior election officials. Hope to continue to do that in Arizona. But your moral authority is so crucial, both with election officials, but also at polling sites. And you're going to learn more about our plans in terms of that. And then lastly, your prophetic advocacy and witness is so crucial in this moment. The courageous leadership that you provide can literally help to save this election and in many ways save our democracy. So I want to close with the words of Congressman John Lewis, who said it best. The right to vote is precious, almost sacred. It is the most powerful, nonviolent tool or instrument in a democratic society. We must use it. And I can't think of a better way to honor not only his life and legacy, but the life and legacy of so many others, than to fight with everything in us to ensure that every voter is protected and that we have a free, fair, and safe election in November. If you join with me in a brief word of prayer. Gracious God, we thank you that you are the author and perfecter of our faith. We thank you for every leader and lawyer and church leader that is gathered together from Arizona right now on this call. Lord, embolden them, inspire them, give them wisdom and courage as they seek to be your instruments of righteousness and justice in the midst of this contentious and contested election. Lord, we pray that we would do everything within our power, that we would pick up the smooth stones you have given us so that we can ensure that every voter is able to cast their vote and that every vote is counted. Lord, continue to watch over us. Continue to bind us together as we seek to do your will, as we seek to try to ensure that a free, fair, and safe election can happen in November. It's in the awesome and incredible name of your Son, Jesus Christ, our Lord and Liberator, we pray. Amen.
Amen. And thank you, Adam. And now it's my pleasure to introduce the two powerhouses for the state of Arizona, which is why we are confident that we will win. And that is Bishop Staccato Powell, Western District, AME Zion Church. And we will be followed immediately by Dr. Warren H. Stewart, Senior Pastor of the First Institutional Baptist Church in Phoenix, Arizona. And then by the Reverend Jim Wallace of Sojourner, in that order: Bishop Powell, Dr. Stewart, and Reverend Jim Wallace.
Thank you, Dr. Barbara Williams Skinner, for being such a superb leader and how you have provided impeccable leadership. You've already heard from both Dr. Williams Skinner, and Adam about the significance of this election. The ordering of my coming before Dr. Warren Stewart and Jim Wallace is because in the tradition of scripture, I'm their forerunner, not worthy to unleash their laces on their shoe. And so I'm here because I serve as the bishop of the Western District, and Arizona is a part of that district. But the real work, as everybody knows, is what's done on the ground. And it's in that regard that Dr. Warren H. Stewart has been in Arizona for quite a number of years, and he knows where every crevice and crack and every sidewalk is, not just in the Phoenix metropolitan area, but throughout the state. And so we are excited about what God is going to do, because it's going to take God. It's, as Adam has already described it, it's a Goliath undertaking. It's a mammoth task. But God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power. And so we are confident that as we go forward over these next 35, 36 days, that when we get down to it, things will be well. I'm grateful to have this coalition between scholars and lawyers having both a degree in divinity and a JD degree. So it fits nicely, and I'm confident that all will be well. Thanks again for the privilege, and I'm confident that what we will see in the next few minutes will be both informative and instructive. I'll close with this. I just spoke with a friend of mine in North Carolina who went to drop off her ballot at the polls, and the ballot of a senior person. And she related to me how intense things are in terms of just getting your ballot dropped off. And if you're dropping off ballots for others, the paperwork that's required. And I'm praying and hoping that these kinds of things will not dissuade people from persevering to get their vote counted. Thanks again, and look forward to going ahead.
Thank you, Bishop Powell. Dr. Stewart. Can't hear you.
So, all right. Let me try it again. To Dr. Skinner and all the distinguished panelists on this forum, thank you for including Arizona in our effort to protect our vote during this critical election. As you have already indicated, Arizona has become a battleground state, and the presidential race, as well as some of the other races, senatorial races, are very close. And the African-American vote here can really make a difference in the outcome. And so we appreciate you including us. We have a network of pastors in northern, southern, central, and western Arizona. We have launched what is called the 2020 Good Trouble Voters Registration and GOTV Drive in honor and memory of the late Reverend Congressman John R. Lewis, who said, if you see something wrong, unfair, unjust, see something, say something, do something, get in trouble, necessary trouble, and voting is good trouble. And so thank you for what you're going to do to help us to protect our vote, because voter suppression is alive and real. I've been listening to radio today, and even in Arizona, our Secretary of State is battling with our governor, trying to make voting accessible to people who are in nursing homes, people in care facilities, as well as the Navajo reservation. The last thing I'll say is that I believe that the most powerful protest this year will be our vote in the November 3rd general election. The most powerful protest this year will be our vote in the November 3rd general election. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Stewart. We are leaning on you because you are the one who knows, as Bishop Powell says, where everyone is who can help in this Lawyers and Collars campaign. Reverend Jim Wallace.
Hello.
We hear you.
Okay. Well, Dr. Stewart and Bishop Powell, old friend, you two and all the ones on this call are the ones who are going to make the difference, I think, in Arizona. Adam Taylor said it well. We all know that democracy is on the ballot. Faith is on the ballot. Dr. Skinner and I, my tag team partner, we just did a piece for Religious News Service out tomorrow on why we need to fast and pray to undergird all our political work, because this is more than politics. You all know, and what I hear from Black church leaders and Black parents all over the country, is that this election is life and death, literally life and death for our families and children. And we wrestle not just against flesh and blood, but principalities and powers in high places, evil in high places. And almost every day, I don't know if you feel this, but almost every day something else happens. Some event, some distraction from the White House, something that happens that says, oh my goodness, now what do we do? This is about evil in high places. This is so much more than politics. And so we have to ready our spiritual weapons. When there's spiritual warfare going on, the Bible talks about the weapons that we have to engage, the shield of faith, truth. And as John Lewis has been quoted already so much in this call, the weapon of our vote is a spiritual weapon. And so Barbara is going to lay out how to ready our weapon of vote, how to prepare for not just politics, but spiritual warfare. How do we get ready? As Barbara said at the start, our God is ready, and we have to be ready with our God, because this is, in fact, how do we ready our weapons of spiritual warfare against evil in high places in this decisive crossroads American election. Everything is at stake that we believe. Everything is at stake. So Barbara, tell us how to ready our weapons for this spiritual warfare.
Thank you. You and Bishop Powell, Dr. Stewart, and Adam have stated prophetically and rightly exactly why we're having this webinar. The lawyers team, lawyers committee team, we are so grateful to Kina Jackson, who's been an amazing national organizer. And now we will hear from their team, Mr. Josue Romaldo, national coordinator, Mr. Ryan Snow, legal fellow for the Voting Rights Project, and Ms. Natasha Charbia, legal fellow for the Voting Rights Project with special expertise in Arizona voting laws. So we're really grateful. It's better to listen to them than to me. They know exactly what is the latest, and we need to hear from them. So Kina Jackson, your team, we are ready for you now. Thank you so much for all you are doing. We can begin with Josue, or Ryan Snow or Natasha Charbia, whoever is going to kick us off.
So I can start us off. Thank you, everybody. My name is Josue Romaldo. I'm a national coordinator at the Lawyers Committee, and I'm joined with my legal partners. So we are based in DC, but we work in Arizona in conjunction with our partners. So we'll go to the today's objectives, but we're going to be going into this in 4 parts. The first part is just to understand the overall structure of the Election Protection Coalition. Then we're going to talk about what your role is going to be as an EP ambassador and what to expect. Then we're going to go into some tools about how to navigate certain most common questions and other tools and resources that we have. And then we're going to go into some Arizona law that is also helpful as we do the work. So Kina, so we're going to start with the introduction to election protection. So who we are a national coalition with many state and national partners. We've recruited over 12,000 grassroots and legal volunteers. We've held over 12 national and local call centers. So a local call center is like you see in the picture right there. It's just a room full of volunteers who do get trained on how to answer phones, how to navigate issues through the 866-RVOTE hotline. The 866-RVOTE hotline has received over 200,000 calls. And the way that we structure this is that we have a field program, legal field, that do include support from grassroots poll monitors in at least 30 states. And we do this in conjunction with our state partners and also national partners who have state and local affiliates and branches that also work well together. We do work with the voter education, so that's also helpful when we coordinate with state partners. We do poll worker recruitment. We actually have our coalition partners in Arizona are doing a poll worker recruitment effort right now, and we do have some resources for a couple states on how to conduct that. And then we do conduct litigation as necessary. So I'll go to the next one. So the next part, and I do want to mention real quick, is that in conjunction with state and national partners, we also have national language access partners that do have their own language access hotlines. So for example, I work very closely with the National Association of Latino Elected Officials, Naleo. They have some programs across the country as well. And then they have their hotline. So we do work in conjunction with them and support each other's efforts. But we, our big program, basically you can split up between hotline and field. So what we're going to talk about next is just the big EP overview. So you have the EP Ambassador Program, and then you'll have, of course, the 8334 Turnout Hotline, and then also the number below that is below. So it is helpful, and we've found this with other partners as well, and even voters to, if you are going to talk about the hotline and maybe produce any materials, that you do, write the text and also write the number below. It is helpful for that. The election volunteer structure is broken down. So we'll have a state lead attorney, a state lead and an attorney, which will be basically working and following through with the hotline that y'all will have. And then you'll have the broken down between pastors and church-based leaders. And I'll have Kina talk about this too, if she can.
Hey everyone, I get the honor of working with Dr. Skinner and your state leads all the time. So I'm gonna quickly break down the election day structure for all of you. So as EP ambassadors, you guys are going to be our eyes and ears in the field. So we are asking all of you to use 8334 Turnout throughout the day to report a variety of issues. So if you have simple questions from voters as you're monitoring polling locations, call 8334 Turnout. If you have bigger issues that we're going to discuss later that should definitely get flagged, you want to call 8334 Turnout. So that hotline is going to be staffed with attorneys that have access to all of the election day materials you have, and also have trained experience on our hotline to take your calls. So again, it is important for you to get to know that number, 8334 Turnout for Election Day. That is your one-stop primary source for information. But like Josue was describing, you also have a state lead attorney that's tapped into our state command center that's going to be able to help you and our field captains troubleshoot issues on election day. So when you run into issues that we can't just get an answer to by a simple Google search or looking at all the materials we provide our attorneys on the hotline, you'll have your state leads and attorneys tapped into our grassroots networks on election day to be able to get the largest issues resolved. So again, it's important for you to get to know 8334 Turnout. That is your resource tool on election day to get all of your questions answered. And I'm going to turn this back over to Josue.
Thanks so much, Kina. Next slide, please. So your role as an EP ambassador. Talking about your shift, your poll monitoring shift, your captain will give you the address of the polling place or the polling places that you're going to be monitoring. Please arrive 15 minutes early, and also please arrive wearing a mask and of course, practicing social distancing. We do encourage poll monitors to bring some water with them. Arizona is a warm state, but we also want to make sure that you are hydrated. You make sure that you get enough rest the day before. And all of this, is helpful as you conduct your volunteer work. Please do introduce yourself to the poll workers and say that you are a nonpartisan volunteer while social distancing. And I'm sorry, I meant not poll worker, I meant EP ambassador. So apologies if I meant, when I said poll monitor, I meant EP ambassador. So sorry about that. And then, the main goal about your work as an EP ambassador is to help voters and record interactions. Next slide, please. What to bring? Your mask, please. The top issues in the FAQs. Really quick on that note, we have just received updated versions of those documents. So we will be circulating those once we have done the final review process, which will take place sometime this week. Please bring credentials, a phone and your phone charger. If you have those portable, they're like roughly this big, like portable phone chargers, those are also helpful. layers of clothing if needed, snack and water, comfortable shoes, the intake forms, and then any extra paper and pens as well. And again, your main role as the EP ambassador for this program is to assist voters, be election protection's eyes and ears, and identify and please do report any problematic practices that do happen. So in our work, we have encountered issues like that at the polls, so we just want to make sure that stuff like that is documented. And in case we do have to go into litigation, like one of those slides said before, we have that documented. You report issues by calling the 833 turnout, and the information that you will need to provide is the name and the contact info, the polling place, the voter's racial and ethnic identification, and then details that will need some follow-up. So it's very important, and I just want to emphasize that any details of the whole situation that you might be helping a voter with is definitely needed when you are writing these reports. But please do know that you can call your field captain if you need further assistance. And why is this important? Why is data reporting important? The election protection leadership in the command center that you'll be a part of will be able to see these issues in real time, allowing them to follow up with the voter, poll workers, or election officials. This data does help the Election Protection Coalition identify and address any voting trends. And then capturing as much data is helpful in case we need to do any follow-up post-election day. And like I said before, any litigation that we might need to complete. Really quickly, just big notes to remember: call the 833 turnout to report problems or help answer any questions. Please do know we are nonpartisan. Our efforts coalition-wide, we are nonpartisan. We help all voters. So please do not share any political beliefs with voters or other volunteers. Most importantly, your body is your temple, so please make sure you take care of it and protect it by wearing a mask and practicing social distancing. And then please don't refer yourself as a lawyer or a voter client. You are a trained volunteer. And be polite. Please don't get into any arguments with poll workers. If you do have issues, remember to call the hotline provided above. So then I will hand this over to my colleague, Natasha, and she'll get started.
Thanks, Josue. As you mentioned, my name is Natasha Chabria. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a legal fellow with the Voting Rights Project, the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights. I'm going to work with Josue as well as my colleague, Ryan, in Arizona. So first and foremost, I want to thank you all for inviting us today to speak with you. Your work is going to be incredibly important in making sure that we're able to fight voter suppression as we move forward into this contentious election. So Josue gave us a really great overview of our program and kinds of logistics of how it works. I'm going to talk a little bit about the resources that we provide to you to make sure that you can be the most effective volunteer possible. So we provide you with a few resources that kind of go over all of the various issues in Arizona specifically. As Josue mentioned, two of the things we'll be providing to you are a document listing the top issues in Arizona and a more comprehensive document that are essentially structured as FAQs. So the top issues is kind of a truncated document that just goes through issues such as polling place hours, voter ID issues, just kind of top line things that we've seen in the state come up over and over again. So if you get a question from a voter in line or you get a question on the hotline, you can kind of go to that to do a quick answer. The FAQs are really comprehensive. We'll show you a little bit later in the slides a picture of the current FAQs, but we've recently expanded them to be even more informative. As COVID-19 has kind of increased the number of calls we receive to the hotline, we've realized that our volunteers need some more accessible information to be able to track down answers for our voters. So the FAQs are going to be broken down into various sections so you can easily access information. So that'll be things like vote by mail, questions around early voting, questions around in-person voting. So you can kind of click to specifically whatever the issue is that you need to help the voter with. And we continuously update those. As Josue mentioned, the pictures that you'll see on the slide and resources that may have been circulated earlier are currently being updated so that they take into account all the various changes that have come about because of COVID-19 litigation and also policies coming down from the legislature. So we will definitely circulate those as soon as we have finalized the latest materials, because that'll be the main resource that folks are going to rely on in the field. The second thing we'd like to point people to is the Arizona Voter Information Guide. So that's available on the Arizona Secretary of State's website. And that's another really important place to look to, because we obviously try to keep our materials as up to date as possible, but sometimes it's just not possible for us to get everything, every change, because it takes so much time. So in theory, the Arizona Secretary of State's website should have the most up-to-date information and any changes that may have occurred. It'll also have the registration lookup tool. So if you get a voter calling into the hotline or someone in the field who needs help making sure that they're registered and you want to check their registration for them, or if you want to look up their polling place, the Secretary of State's website will have a tool that you can enter in their information to verify all of that. The third available resource, as Josue mentioned, is your field captain. Now, this is a person who's going to be extensively trained on the issues as well as the protocols of the EP program, and they'll be able to answer any questions you have that you can't find in any of the resources I mentioned above. The field captain will have a direct line to other folks at the National Election Protection Coalition. So if anything comes up that they don't have the answer to, they'll reach out to us and we'll try our best to get back to you. So this kind of, again, goes back to the point Josue made about collecting as much information as you can about the issue that the voter you're trying to help is experiencing. The more information that you have, the better you'll be able to help them and the better you'll be able to escalate the issues to us. So if there's something that you can't find in the FAQs, you can't find on the Secretary of State's website, the more information we have, the better we can determine what the proper solution is. If you could just go back to the last slide. And finally, as Josue mentioned, the hotline. So this 8334 turnout hotline is going to be the main source of really coalescing all of these various issues. So if you are unable to answer a question, if you're in the field, if you're a hotline volunteer, please direct folks to the hotline, because we'll have people trained answering those calls with additional information and additional resources. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned earlier, this is a screenshot of the Arizona Voter Information Guide on the Secretary of State's website. So this, in addition to, as I mentioned, having polling place lookup or registration lookup tools, we'll have all of the other rules that Arizona State promulgates around voting. So it'll have all their rules about absentee voting, about voting in person, deadlines, all of those sorts of things. Next slide, please. And again, as I mentioned, the voter registration tool is going to be key. A significant number of calls that we receive to our national hotline revolve around people looking for help around voter registration, and additionally looking for help identifying their polling place. So we most often direct our volunteers to enter the information of the caller into the voter registration lookup tool. Sometimes those voter registration lookup tools will go down, and that's another critical piece of information to note. So if you're trying to help a voter figure out if their registration is up to date or active, and you find the Secretary of State's website tool is down, that would be something to escalate to your field captain or to us as the national team, so that we can then do the proper advocacy to make sure that we are getting folks the appropriate assistance that they need. When you are doing someone's sorry, if you could just go back, please. When you are doing someone's registration, the main things you'll need from them are their driver's license number or state ID number or their voter ID number. Now, some folks kind of get pushback on that because they don't want to give that information, but I think it's really important for you as the advocate and as the volunteer to just express that you're trying to help them get this information. And you can, if they feel uncomfortable giving you that information, you can direct them to this tool so they can look that up themselves. Next slide, please. As I mentioned earlier, one of the documents that we will be providing volunteers is the Arizona Top Issues page. So as you can see, this is just sort of a quick streamlined look at some of the main issues we've seen across several elections in Arizona, as well as kind of quick answers to them. And we will circulate these as they're updated and kind of more easily digestible. Next slide, please. And this is a screenshot of our FAQs. So now, as I mentioned, I know this seems really comprehensive, but we've actually built out the FAQs even further to be more comprehensive and more accessible of a tool to our volunteers. So The ones that will circulate later, once they're fully updated, will be broken down by issue area so that once a voter calls in, you'll be able to quickly click to the point that has the information and get them the information they need. Next slide, please. All right, now I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Ryan to kind of give us an overview of Arizona election law.
Thanks, Natasha, and hello all. And I'm just so pleased to be speaking with you. I really appreciate your involvement in this program. I'm going to put in the chat a link to the current FAQs, and I don't want to spend too much time going over specifics, in part because we are literally today we got a new updated version of these, and we'll be reviewing and posting to this link or to our website a 100% current version of these reflecting any changes that may have happened. But I think it makes sense to review those, and we will be circulating a more 100% updated version when we've had a chance to review. We did get a question in the chat, and I think it's come up a couple times, a question about the partisan or nonpartisan nature, and I think it's important to emphasize, election protection and the lawyers and college program is 100% nonpartisan. There certainly have been blurred lines as far as religious context campaigning, but I think it's important to emphasize that our program is 100% nonpartisan, and that means no candidate advocacy. It means no party advocacy. Even though the communities that we serve may have and certainly do have a strong partisan slant, I think it's important to emphasize that all of the work we do is organized towards helping voters participate, however that shakes out. So again, I don't want to spend too much time going through individual specifics. I think we'll follow up with materials that delve into that. I think our time might be best used by talking about logistics and answering any questions you may have about how this program is going to work. But we can certainly also answer specific questions about the law as needed. So I think that's the best. I think that's the best way to move forward.
Yeah, Ryan, this is Dr. William Skinner. Could you just go over a few examples that may occur on election day without going through the entire detail? I think that would be helpful.
Sure. So,
that escalate at the level that
Sure.
Keena Jackson talked about.
Sure. So, based on the calls that we've gotten during this cycle so far, I think, obviously one of the big issues is going to be voting by mail and how folks can participate in that process. Of course, in Arizona, I think about 80% of voters receive a ballot by mail, typically. But that may even be higher in this cycle. So I believe the deadline for requesting a ballot is October 23rd. I'm looking through the numbers right now. But I think again, this is something that will circulate with certainty. In Arizona, these ballots can be returned in person. And again, we'll circulate certainty about all the details. I don't want to say something that's not 100% true. So I want to make sure that we've had time to verify all this information. And I also defer to my colleagues if they have more information about this. I think the best thing to do would be to field questions maybe about any specific circumstances that might come up, and see if we can answer them accordingly.
Yeah, and Ryan, I think we can just go through kind of one scenario for how things have been escalated. So for example, let's take the issue of broken equipment, or actually more specifically to you all, because you'll be in the field, let's take the issue of electioneering. So most states have boundaries within which you can and cannot engage in political activity near the polling place. I don't know off the top of my head, and Ryan, you may know what the boundary is, how many feet away from the polling place for Arizona. But some things that we've seen in other states that may be challenging are our nonpartisan poll monitors, EP ambassadors such as yourself, being called out for violating the electioneering boundary. So if that happens to be the case for you all, that would be a scenario in which first you would try to talk to the poll worker that you hopefully have built up a proper rapport with and a good relationship with, to say, hey, I'm just a nonpartisan election protection ambassador here to support voters. But if they do push back on that, the second thing you would do, and thank you, Ryan. So in Arizona, the electioneering zone is 75 feet. So you can't be engaging in political activity within 75 feet of a polling place. So even though we are nonpartisan, sometimes you do get pushback. So if you are unable to resolve that amicably with a poll worker in that location, the next thing you would do is escalate that. So you would call that through the structure that Kina and others kind of laid out, so that we can then do advocacy to help you effectively engage in your work. So that's kind of one of the scenarios in which you may escalate that. Similar with the broken equipment, right? Like, so if you are monitoring a specific polling place and you're getting a lot of reports from voters saying that there's broken equipment, you're seeing long lines and people are saying it's because machines are down, what you would do is then call that into the hotline so that someone with connections to county officials can then try to make sure that matter is resolved. So those are the sorts of ways that you would interact and use the hotline to escalate issues, particularly for things that you cannot resolve from the FAQs or from just having a conversation with the workers that you're engaging with there.
Okay. All right, let's talk a little bit about, if you would, voter suppression and de-escalation tactics. Can you share that a bit with us, please? Any one of you, are you thinking about that? Because that is on the minds of a lot of pastors. And we're asking them to be the moral presence with church-based lawyers at a time when the tempers are high, conflict is higher, and people are all charged up. What are you planning for that? What are you recommending for that?
So I think it would be helpful if we, I think we could just finish real quick with whatever slides we have, Kina, if that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
We can table that further.
I wish you would.
Yeah, I would say, Dr. Skinner, we're going to get to that. We just want to make sure we hit these important election law points right before we get there.
I was getting for Ryan to know that we were stopping, so I just wanted to make sure. I thought you were. No, we do need to go to the end of the slide.
Okay. All right.
Thanks.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So really quickly, unless we're, Ryan, do you want to finish this section off?
Sure. You can see on your screen, the deadline to register to vote is 29 days before the election, which is October 5th, which is, of course, next week. I believe
Monday.
And you can see on your screen the qualifications to vote and the website to vote, which you can refer to and refer voters to. You can register online or by mail or in person.
I can take this part if you want.
Sure.
Because we are limited time and we want to save it for questions. But in case like you encounter, you know, a voter who like encounters an issue, or at some point we've encountered voters saying that like the poll worker is telling me I'm not listed on, you know, on the registered rolls. You know, the common reasons a voter may not be listed as registered voters is people who move, and they might be moving from one jurisdiction to another, or any felony conviction. So I think this would be one of those points where you would actually help them out with that. Really quickly, we won't go into this nitty gritty, but voters with a criminal conviction who are in jail or in prison, for individuals who have committed a single felony, Arizona courts automatically restore the civil rights upon completion of their term probation, or any payment of any fines or restitution are imposed. So that is one important thing that we definitely emphasize partners to, talk about that. And of course, again, we also have the hotline to escalate any issues. If you have a question, can I register to vote in Arizona if I'm in jail? Individuals held or serving a sentence for a misdemeanor conviction still remain eligible to register and to vote. So one thing that we do want to just emphasize that if there are any other questions, for more information, you can definitely contact the county recorder for more info. Next slide. Common questions about voter ID. What ID do I need? Does my address on my ID need to match with the one that I registered with? Can I use an expired ID? So we'll get into that. So types of ID that can be used to check in before voting are a valid driver's license ID, a tribal enrollment card, or other form of tribal ID, or a valid U.S. federal, state, or local government ID. It is sufficient to have an ID that bears the names, the voters' names and the registered precinct address. But you also, very important, you don't need to have a ID with a photograph. So you can have that, or you can have a sufficient ID without a photograph with the name and the registered address. Something that can be used to, prove that is a utility bill, bank statement, valid vehicle registration, an Indian census card, property tax document, or anything else that can basically confirm that you do live where your registration says. Next slide. Does my address on my ID need to match registration? Absolutely. Yes, 100%. Any additional ID requirements? There are some. So the ID is valid unless it can be determined on its face and that has expired. If poll workers are turning voters away, if they don't have a photo ID, you should absolutely immediately please flag your hotline captain, because then we can escalate and intervene and help out. Can I vote with an expired ID? Depends. Acceptable forms of ID, including, so there's a typo there. I should say Arizona. So the FAQs that we have that will be circulating for everybody does have that updated information. So we can just skip that right now, but we can provide the more detailed information. So Kina, why don't you go into the next slide? Unless Ryan or Natasha, do you know this off the back?
I don't, but the updated FAQs will have that broken down specifically by subject matter area. So if you are receiving a lot of questions about voter ID specifically, you can just click straight to that section and it'll have all of that.
Perfect. We had in the past have had issues with broken machines. So if you encounter a voter that says I couldn't vote because machines are broken, please definitely find out approximate time it will take for the machines to be fixed. If it's less than 10 minutes, definitely help in alerting the voters. If it is more than 30 minutes, please call the 833, the TurnOut hotline. Flag it for your field captain so that they can make sure that you have all the information needed. So we have encountered that in the past where broken machines and other tech issues have delayed the voting process. So the sooner that you flag this to your captains, the better. Next slide. Common questions about assistance. So am I disabled? Can I help? Yeah, can I get some help voting? 100% voters will be accompanied by an assisted person of their choice, but they cannot receive any assistance at the polling place from his or her employers. What if someone can't vote and they don't have, or because they don't have a proficient level of English? They can still vote. Voters who cannot read or write in English or have limited English proficiency can still receive assistance at the polling place from a person of their choice, including a friend, family member. But we do want to make sure that Arizona law, every polling place should have ballots in Spanish. Which brings me to this next point. Because Arizona does have a lot of tribal communities, the following counties are required to provide assistance in languages other than English. So Apache, Coconino, Gila, Graham, Navajo, and Pinal have the following languages there. So please take a look at that and take note. So if we do, I think we briefly talked about this, but if any, electioneering, Arizona law prohibits electioneering within 75 feet of the main outside entrance of the polling place. It does apply to everybody and covers activities such as, intended to support or oppose a specific candidate or political party, or for someone to try and influence a voter's vote.
So just one note on that electioneering piece. We have had some trouble with field volunteers in other states getting in trouble with the attire that they've been wearing while being EP ambassadors or poll monitors. So we really suggest that if you are going to be out in the field, just wear something neutral or wear something with the election protection information on it. This way you don't even have to worry about espousing any sort of view that could get you in trouble.
So really quickly, the vote by mail issues. We've gotten calls about voters who don't receive their ballot by mail. So one way to check the status is to go to the link right there, my.arizona.vote/absentee tracker. Once the voter has mailed it in, they cannot get another ballot. So if the voter never got their ballot by mail, how do they vote? They should go to their polling place and cast a provisional ballot. Except in Maricopa County would be regular ballot. The voter still has their mail-in ballot, but wants to vote in person. Ballots can be dropped off at the polling place within the voter's county of residence before 7 p.m. on election day. So if you have your vote by mail, if you have someone who has a vote by mail and would still like to vote in person, they can go to any polling place within the county. Importantly, ballots must be received by the voter's county recorder's office no later than 7 p.m. on election day. Ballots can be dropped off at any polling place within the voter's county. And then questions about challenges. So what if you encounter someone, if someone is getting their vote challenged, what should they do? Ask to be sworn in the poll by the poll worker, answer whatever questions are necessary, vote. You should also call the hotline to report the incident and wait for your hotline specialist or field captain to instruct you on the next steps that are necessary. But if someone outside of the polling place is harassing voters, which we have encountered that in Arizona, specifically for the Latinx, Latina community, demanding to see their citizenship or proof of eligibility, that's not okay. Please definitely flag that by calling the hotline below. Wait for your hotline specialist and captain to give you the next steps.
Yeah, and these are situations in which we really ask that you get as many details as you possibly can, because more likely than not, that's going to be something that'll be escalated that we'll need to follow up on. So the more information you can give us about the scenario, the better we can figure out the appropriate intervening mechanism.
So for this next part, can I register to vote? Can I vote on election day? This is a Q&A. Keena, how are we doing on time? Do we want to just jump into the last section?
Definitely. We can do some highlights and take some questions.
Great. Just the highlights of the whole presentation: ensure every eligible voter can cast a ballot. EP, election protection is nonpartisan. Wear a mask. Please protect yourself. You're protecting others and yourself. Practice social distancing and definitely vote early if you can. Please show up to your assigned polling places, which will be given by your captain 15 minutes early. Correct is better than quick. I want to emphasize that. Correct information is better than just trying to get an answer very quickly. We want to make sure that the voter is casting the ballot fairly and correctly, or addressing and answering any questions. We've had issues in the past where we are, in order to get them processed or vote and get out of there, information might be incorrect. So please make sure correct information is better than just quick. When in doubt, if you don't know the answer to a question, or if you can't find it on the updated FAQs, which we will provide, definitely please call the TurnOut 8334-TURNOUT hotline. And I think we can just open it up for a few minutes for any questions that y'all may have.
Yeah, and I do want to address Dr. Skinner's point about de-escalation. So we do recognize that particularly in this contentious election, particularly in a state like Arizona that has such a diverse population, and given the current atmosphere, there are possibilities for scenarios of harassment. So one of the things that our coalition has been really, really cognizant of is trying to develop a plan to make sure that all of our volunteers and ambassadors are as safe as possible. So one of the things that they're recommending are that folks don't engage with harassers if possible. We don't want to further escalate the issue or cause any other problems for the voters in line or the other people in the area. The other thing that we would recommend is, if you can safely do so, to try to record the incident in some way. Again, emphasis on if you can safely do so. So that'll obviously depend on your identity, your location, and your personal feelings of safety in that situation. Again, it's really important to provide as much information as possible to not only us, but the rest of our national team and the rest of your lawyers and callers team to make sure that we're able to address the situation as effectively as possible. Now, our Arizona coalition partners are offering a de-escalation training that they've developed with the Center for Popular Democracy, and that's going to specifically go through techniques that you can use while you're in the field if you do experience any sort of harassment. So we can definitely circulate that information to Kina and to Dr. Skinner so that they can pass that on to you and you can partake in that training. And Josue, Ryan, if you have additional information about that, please feel free to share.
Thanks, Natasha. I would just add that, kind of thinking about the big picture, I think one of the most valuable aspects of this program is identifying issues and collecting information about what's happening. So, the election protection program and the hotline and all of what we do is certainly focused on making sure that voters are informed and know how to participate in the process. It's also about identifying issues where voters are having difficulty and addressing those issues. So, the more information that we can collect and the more detailed information we can collect helps us, whether it's following up with election officials or litigation if it's necessary. But certainly, just as a process point, collecting as much information as possible, as detailed as possible, is very helpful. And in more specific context, in the context of, say, harassment or intimidation, making sure that we have, whether it's in person or online or any context, making sure that we have that information. In the August 4th election in Arizona, there was a social media post that we followed up on that was making threatening comments, just as an example. But certainly that's a point of emphasis, is making sure that we have the information that we need to follow up effectively. And I also wanted to address one of Dr. Skinner's question earlier. I mean, that it's a difficult point. It's a difficult line to walk when you want to highlight voters, the issues that we're facing in terms of voter suppression, but you also don't want to be negative about voting, and you want to make sure that people feel comfortable and confident in voting. And so that's just a difficult line to walk in messaging. In terms of making sure that we're highlighting these issues while also not discouraging people from participating. So I just wanted to flag that.
Thank you. Okay. So those examples were extremely helpful. Brandon, could you see if there are any questions? I don't see any I see a few. Oh, there are a couple in the chat. Kina, do you want to connect with those if there are questions? I don't see any. I don't see any audience questions. I think the question that I asked were what pastors have called me about and are concerned about how we're handling that. I think the information on the de-escalation training right away would be extremely helpful, and it would help people to have a sense of readiness. Alabama, I'm sorry, I just finished Alabama. Arizona is an open carry state, is that correct?
Yes,
Okay.
it is.
Could you
So
just
that actually, go ahead, Dr. Skinner, sorry.
Yeah, could you please just talk about in past elections, maybe there's none like the one coming up, but let's say, as far as you know, in past elections, have people as an intimidation tool shown up with their guns and the legal limit, they're outside the legal limit? Talk about that, because my issue is, I don't mind having good or bad news. I just need to understand what I'm likely to face so I can prepare our pastors for that.
So that, I think, is going to be addressed in the de-escalation training, because during the August 4th primary, we had one issue with an open carrier individual that was standing outside of a polling place. I don't remember if they were, I think they were outside of the 75-foot line, but that still was alarming because it is an open carrier. And I believe they weren't necessarily like flashing it around, but it was very visible. So that's why the coalitional partners are taking the initiative to create that de-escalation training so that we can address situations like that. So we promise, and we'll make sure that once that is completed, we'll circulate it, because it is a frightening and alarming situation to face. And I'm actually touching base with one of them who is helping build the de-escalation training sometime this week. So I'm hoping that by the end of this week, or not earlier next week, we'll have an update for you.
Thank you.
And I will note that folks are not allowed to, even though Arizona is an open carry state, you are not allowed to bring your weapon into the polling place. You must leave it in your car or some other place while you are actually voting. So if you do hear of instances of people violating that buffer zone line, please, please, please escalate that up to the hotline, because that's something that we definitely need to be aware of.
Okay. Okay. Can you talk a little bit about the work with the Navajo Nation, and has there been a connection between Black pastors and Navajo leaders in the past, or is this something that would be new that needs to be established quickly?
I don't think there's been any cooperation to my knowledge. We do have an Arizona coalition call that is happening, so I'm not sure if they're going to address if there's anything new, but to our knowledge, we haven't. I don't think there's been any. I don't know, Natasha or Ryan, anything? Maybe I'm remembering something wrong.
I don't know from the faith perspective. I know that they do have a very robust election protection hotline of their own, where they field calls from Native communities specifically.
Okay. So is their work exclusively for Indigenous leaders, election protection specialists, and that is something that we don't need to worry about, or is that something we should connect with? We're willing to do that. We just need guidance on that.
I don't know specifically about faith leaders in the Navajo Nation, but there are other faith coalitions in the state that I believe I connected you with, and if I did not, we can definitely connect about that offline, and I'm happy to make that introduction, who are really excited to partner with you all.
Absolutely, same here. Okay, Dr. Stewart or Bishop Powell?
Yes.
Adam, do you have any questions?
Dr. Skinner, there are a couple of questions in the chat room, one from Pastor Buchanan from Sierra Vista, Arizona, and another one from Linda Martin Boyd. So there are some questions in the chat room.
Okay, Kina, can you manage?
And I'm good.
Yep, I'll answer those questions for you all. So I know our Arizona team has another meeting, so if they need to hop off, I'll go ahead and take these questions. But in regards to Pastor Buchanan's questions about limitations of promoting EP, we're asking that you let your congregation know that they can call 866-OUR VOTE on Election Day. That's 866-OUR VOTE on Election Day. We want to make sure that the pastors have an open line to your volunteers and to your hotline specialists. So 833-4-TURNOUT. We want to be used exclusively for pastors because, again, we know that you guys are going to be the ones flagging really important issues for us on Election Day, and we don't want that line to get bombarded with public calls, but we do have a hotline for the public that is 866-OUR-VOTE. They can go to 866-OURVOTE.org, and they can also, to talk to a live specialist on Election Day, they can also they can also text 866-OUR-VOTE. But for pastors, we're asking you to call your designated hotline, 833-4-TURNOUT on Election Day, because we want to make sure that we're seeing all of the important information that you guys are going to be giving us on Election Day. I think the other question I may have answered, are we encouraging volunteers to, folks to volunteer on Election Day? Definitely. I think in Arizona, they have Common Cause is coordinating volunteers on the ground. So that should be protectthevote.org. I believe that's protectthevote.org. So if you know any volunteers or folks that want to volunteer on Election Day, they should go to protectthevote.org. And I think those are all the questions that we have in the chat.
Dr. Stewart, you're good? Dr. Powell?
Yes, I have one more question and I'll be done. About the apparel for the volunteers, you said not to wear, partisan, but if someone were to wear a Black Lives Matter shirt or a sorority or fraternity, is that advised against?
So that's a little bit of a tricky question, because a Black Lives Matter t-shirt in and of itself is not a political statement, but because the movement has become so politicized in the discourse of this election, just for the safety of volunteers, my personal recommendation would be to, it's your own judgment call, I think, given your understanding of the situation, given your understanding of the area in which you'll be placed. I don't think we can tell you to not wear something like that, particularly because it is an incredibly important statement to make. But we also want to make sure that everyone who is engaging in this program and serving as an EP ambassador is as safe as they can possibly be. So I think, it's a judgment call.
Thank you.
Sounds like a judgment call.
Okay.
And I think there's a question that might be somewhat related about promoting election protection from the pulpits. And I mean, election protection is completely nonpartisan. It's about making sure that every voter is able to participate in the process, period. So no hesitation. You can absolutely promote voting and election protection as a protection of voting and your right to vote, because it's nonpartisan. And that's again, something that we want to emphasize and really protect our ability to do that in a nonpartisan way.
Yes, and we will have masks for our pastors with TurnOut Sunday lawyers and collars, and we are totally nonpartisan as well. Okay, we want to thank the Lawyers Committee team, your exceptional focus on the process that we'll follow for Election Day. What is really clear is that the 1-833-4-TURNOUT number, which is 1-833-687-6688, that number is only for Election Day and night. Any questions that come up before November 3rd, as Kena Jackson has said, people should call 1-866-OUR-VOTE, okay? Just so they are covered either way. If they have questions leading up to that, they're covered. There's a wealth of information in this presentation, which your pastors or those tuning in to the webinar are welcome to share. Quite a few websites, frequently asked questions. Let me just ask one final question. Will the frequently asked questions be updated before the election? They will be. So where would we find the most recent version? If someone wanted to check on that.
So we just got from our partners who were reviewing this information today, just to make sure it's updated. The most recent version was updated in July, so it's probably mostly accurate. And I believe there was a link circulated in the chat earlier for that, but and I'll just recirculate it real quick.
Okay.
But, our website 866 Our Vote. Oh, not that one. Sorry.
Okay.
866 Our Vote. .org.
Okay.
That has state-specific information for Arizona, including.
Okay. All right. Thank you guys so much. Appreciate it. All the good information. And I know we'll be following up with you. Dr. Stewart, thank you so much again.
Thank you very much for having us.
We'll talk to you right away. Take care, everyone. Take care.
Thanks.
All right. Goodbye.
Thank you.